Hello and welcome to Azure User Group Sweden. Now, today we will unfortunately not have Jonah with us. She had a bit of a sore throat there, so she needed to rest. But we have our guest there, Radu Vunvulea, who will speak about secure application development. But before we start our stream, I will just give some short background information about me and also about our user group here. So my name is Håkan Silvernagel. I work as an AI evangelist at Soprasteria in Norway. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in artificial intelligence, a Microsoft certified trainer, a public speaker, and also a community organizer. So we have a code of conduct here for our meetups. So we should be nice and friendly. You should listen with purpose and be thoughtful. You should be respectful to others. You seek to understand, not criticize, and be curious and open to share ideas, and also be inclusive in your comments or questions. And if you want to join our meetup community to keep track on when our next meetup is scheduled, you can scan this QR code. And we are always looking out for speakers. So regardless if you're an experienced speaker or if you have never spoken before, you can submit the session here to our sessionized call for speaker. And if you're new, both me and Jonah will be able to help you with your presentation. And at the end of our show, we also would like to invite you here for a short digital fika, which is a short Zoom meeting where you'll be able to speak directly to our speaker and to us if you want to discuss things more in detail. So you can scan this QR code. I will show it also at the end of a session, and I will also send out the link in the chat here. So with that said, I would like to invite Radu here onto the stage here. So welcome, Radu.
Hi, hello everybody, and thank you for having me today.
Yeah, so just a little bit more formal introduction here. So Radu is a technology enthusiast. He's working as a group head of cloud delivery for Endava, and he has a vast experience in different technologies and industries. Most of his time is spent working with the cloud, helping companies to innovate and finding solutions to their business problems. He enjoys building bridges between people and helping others to grow. And he shares his knowledge on both his personal blog and also at different events where he's invited as a speaker. And in his spare time, he drives an IT community, and he's also a Microsoft Regional Director and a Microsoft Azure MVP. So we're very happy to have you here with us.
Thank you for your invitation, and I hope that you will enjoy the session that I prepared.
So would you like to say a couple of words about your session for our viewers here, what they will learn today?
Yes, initially the first time when I built this session was in 2022. It was very focused on developer tools and so on, but things change, and we realized that there's so many other services that we need to consider. We need to integrate with our application layer that I have 10 main topics, 10 main areas that I would like to share with you. For some of them, you might know them, but what I notified, because on my side time, I'm also doing different assessments for cloud solution, that many times these are the main components that applications don't cover them fully or just hit them a little bit. And most of the cases is because the business value to them is not presented right, or just because of time and money that the customer or the business has to invest in them. But they are crucial if you want to have a secure application.
Nice. Yeah, so it's also one thing I forgot to mention here is this October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So that's also very fitting here with the topic here for today. So before we start here, we just got some message here. So we got message from Nikos Delis. He's saying good morning from Chile, Malmö. Nikos is also one of our community members. And we got the message here from Jonah. Good noon, everyone. Håkan and everyone. So with that said, I will add your presentation here, and then the stage is yours.
Okay, I think it is time to start. I'm planning to finish at 55, 12:55. Some people time, it's 1:55 for me. So, hi guys, nice meeting you all. Today, secure application development. We'll talk about a lot of Azure services. Short story long, we have Web Architecture Framework for Microsoft Azure. Also, we have for AWS and for Google Cloud. But we know that time, uh, available budget, and in the end, team size provides us constraints about what we can do and what we can add. And today I want to emphasize what are the core things that we need to put in place. And just to give you an example, how important is security and what can be the impact cost. I'm working for Endava, and one of our core business is building financial applications, payment gateways. For example, in a payment gateway space, if you're building an Azure solution and you are at the beginning, you're a small payment gateway that you don't still have large customer, a high number of transactions, you can end up easily in the first year to have around 40-50% of your consumption done only by the secure virtual appliances like firewall, monitoring tools, and so on. Why? Because of the PCI DSS and other compliances that are requiring you to have that explicit layer. Even if you don't need to follow any kind of compliance regulations, you need to consider that any kind of secure service that you're adding also might or might not add an additional cost. In most of the cases would add, but sometimes we have out of the shelf solutions or features that we need to consider. So this is my mission for today, to see what are the services that we need to consider. So who am I? Thank you for the short bio, for the short presentation. In the meantime, my hat inside Endava changed. I'm now VP of Cloud, but this is not important. What is more important here in this context is that I started my journey in cloud on Windows Azure, as we used to call it in the past, in 2009. And starting from then, I think that around 90-95% of my time was around cloud, around Azure, and around AWS. I was involved in different type of projects, and I've done and I saw a lot of mistakes from which I learned. So what I'm trying now to do is to learn from the past experience and to apply that layer of best practices that provide a good balance between how much you invest and what you get, depending on your business in the industry that you're part of and what you would like to achieve. And of course, what is the life cycle and the lifespan of the application that you're building. I will start with 2020, and why this is very important, because in 2020 we saw a high level of migration of application to the cloud. There was a trend that I think that went around 1 year and a half, where everybody was doing cloud, everybody was migrating to cloud. But everybody was running to cloud, meaning they were just investing, taking the payloads, taking the data, pushing them to the cloud, and nothing more than that. After that, people expected, or we expected, that people will start to go on the cloud modernization journey, in the cloud acceleration part, meaning that, okay, we've done the migration, now we need to consolidate it. From security, from how you run your workloads and payloads, from the data point of view, and so on. But not all the time this happens. This is why, for example, we saw in UA only in the first year in 2020 an increase of cyber attacks at around 250, and the trend went with the same value. Large-scale breaches only in 2020 increased with around 273, and that's huge. And what is more interesting, with people that were working from home, around half of them fall in phishing scams. Now, phishing scams, don't think about all the times related to a phishing scam, stealing your credit card information or taking control of your business account and so on. Phishing attacks scams also were related to joining online events when they were able to steal your name, your profile, your email, and so on, or trapping you in different websites or systems where they were getting your data. I will not name, but there also were some online video platforms where you were able to join and to see all the others that were joining or their Facebook account and so on. So there were a lot of scams and ways how you could collect data, building people profiles and so on. So phishing attacks increased up to 350 per year. And also the interest for cloud went up, meaning that only for APAC increased with around 70%, the same in Europe, in Japan, in Americas. And also different workloads increased drastically, especially the retail and the insurance. I don't know how is in different places in the world. But I would say that until 2020, for example, making an online insurance to your car or personal life and so on was not so common. Nowadays, everybody is doing. What does this mean? A lot of business went to the cloud. Retails, the same thing. Maybe you heard in US a lot of retails close physically because there are not so many people that are going to store any anymore and so on. And just in 2 or 3 months, around half a million people were already affected by breaches. That I was giving you an example, video conferences where people were storing the data. So what is my mission to today and why I went back to 2020? I went back to 2020 because 2020 was a trigger, was the moment in time when cloud adoption had a big spike. A good one, a bad one, I don't know. But that spike triggered that a lot of systems end up somewhere in the cloud, many times running and built in the same way as on-prem. Not only from the payloads and from the data and storage point of view, but also the way how security is designed, managed, and run. Cloud and on-prem, you might say that are similar. And yes, they have the same concepts. Nevertheless, they're a little bit different because there are different aspects that you need to consider. Some of them are virtual, some of them are the one that you don't need to manage on-prem, and you need to know exactly how you can tackle them. So this is my mission. Take 10 different dimensions of security of application in the cloud and try to cover them in the next 40, 35, 40 minutes. So nothing more than that. We will just take one by one and go with different examples and so on. I will try to emphasize for each aspect the one that I am considering more relevant for us. Now we are not yet at the final thoughts. Will be for a little bit at the end. So let's start with the first one, identity and access management. And when I'm saying identity and access management, I'm considering this more than how users are accessing their application. Yeah, this is one part, but I'm more than sure that the current audience that we have here, you might be developers, DevOps, testers, infrastructure, data science engineers, and so on. And what is one of the trends that I see on the market, if you're working for a company, let's say for 10 years, and you're moving from one project to another, you're working for the same customer, let's say for 5 years, you might request access to a pre-production environment. Maybe you're doing level 3 support for even for production environment, and you're getting access to different systems, to different parts of the systems, of different application and so on. And the truth is that I'm not now, we are not in a physical room to say raise your hand, but I'm more than sure that many of you have full access uh, to some production parts of the systems, or you got access a few months or years ago and you can still have access to the systems even you shouldn't have access to it anymore. And everything is reduced in a simple way to access role-based access control. And I want to highlight especially the one that is from Microsoft on Entra ID, so-called Azure AD. We have three main components that we need to consider: security principle, roles, and scope. What is the security principle? Security principle is who has access. And we're not talking about only users. We can have a security principle, a service principle, and that can be, for example, an Azure function or a job, and that can be identified by Azure and ensure that he has a specific role. Let's say a role of he can have a role of read and write and so on to a specific scope. Can be storage, can be Cosmos DB, can be anything. What is here important to keep in mind that you don't need to manage tokens, access keys, and things like that when you're working with Azure services. You can rely on managed identities and on service principle to ensure that another service can have the right access role to a storage, to a database, or to any other resource. What we need to consider, and this is very, very important, is that except what kind of passwords we are using, to use a single sign-on and multi-factor, is to think about how you're building the application, who has access to what. One are the customers, on the other side is the technical team. And when talking about the technical team, you need to ensure that you provide the least privileged access. And this is something that is very hard to implement. Because to be able to have an end-to-end solution where you say, for example, DevOps have access to the pipeline, can modify the pipeline, can trigger maybe with some gates rollout in pre-production and production environments, they don't have access to that environment, to that databases. That's something that you need to consider. Another thing is that when somebody has access to the portal, to the Azure portal, and for example, they have access to do some configurations, maybe even in pre-production or testing or other environments, you might need to ensure that they cannot access the data, the storage. So playing with this role-based access control with the groups and so on, even if you might say, oh, it's easy, when you put everything in place, it's a challenge because you need to consider all the flows. And when new cases pop up, you need to see, okay, how I can cover them. What is the best way to cover them? The second topic that I would like to cover is about data protection. And now with the data protection, we already know about encryption, about the key vault, and so on. But now I would say that the biggest challenge when we say data protection is when we put AI on top of it. Because until now, for example, we had our applications in different running in different maybe subscriptions or resource group for each subsystems. And now with the AI, you need to maybe to consolidate them inside a large lake like Microsoft Fabric. But on top of that, you need now to provide access to a system like, let's say, OpenAI. And now the challenge is how you protect this data because you need to do the labeling, You need to have that catalog, and you need to ensure that the person or the system that is on the other side and is accessing through that AI solution, maybe through a chat or through a bot and things like that, the data has the right access to be able to see the data, to access them, and so on. How you are doing this? There are some mechanisms, but in the end, you need to have the labeling, you need to have groups, and you need to ensure that, for example, only people maybe from the financial, from the legal, and from the sales can have access, for example, to information related to the opportunities, related to the grow margin, and so on. And the rest of the people that are part of the company don't have access to this kind of information. Another component that is very important is about how you do the monitoring and how you react to it. And let's start with the monitoring part. There are a lot of services. Some of them that I really enjoy is Azure Sentinel and Defender. These two, combined with Azure Monitoring and Application Insights, are great. It gives you the ability, more or less, to be in a, let's say, event-driven monitoring mechanism, where you have events that can trigger different alerts, and depends what you're doing with that alert. And why I'm saying this, because I see a lot of solutions where we are putting alerts for A, B, C, D, and so on. And what you're doing when an alert is triggered? Oh, we're sending an email. Okay. And what does that person is doing when he sees that alert? Oh, he will go in the console, he will verify, and so on. Okay, this is great. After a few months in production, we are looking what happened in the last three months, and what we found out. Well, we had an alert on possible breach that was triggered for 100 times in the last 3 months. Okay, and what we've done? Well, for the first 4 or 5 times, we've done an investigation. We saw that is a false positive trigger, and we done nothing. Okay, good. And the rest of 95 alerts that were on the same time, well, we didn't done anything because there were some false positive, meaning that you need to adjust the system all the time, and also you need to consider to connect to some I would say this phase automatically triggers that could, for example, trigger an action that would block automatically an IP or limit access to a specific storage or access of a user, and so on. What now appears on the market, and we need to keep an eye on that because there are more and more solutions regarding that part, is to combine this stream of events that are happening in the audit, in the logs, basically more or less the monitoring part, with AI solution that can react automatically and take actions. Meaning that you have a system that can react dynamically to what is happening, to understand what is the user behavior, what is the normal user behavior. When a behavior for user change, and the action that he would need to do. What I'm saying by behavior, let's say that you have some systems, a third-party system that usually access 5 or 6 APIs that you are exposing. This is happening for 1 year. And after that, you notify that that's it, the third party is starting also to look for other APIs, trying to access them, trying to fetch other kind of data that he used to fetch until now. That is a trigger. That is changing the behavior of the third party. And maybe you will need to react. Maybe you would need to shut down the access for a temporary period of time, or just to notify the support team to validate if the behavior is the expected one or something happened behind the scene. Now, going a little bit close to the development side, we have so-called secure code development, where we do performance static code analysis, we incorporate security checks in the pipeline, and we scan third-party dependence for vulnerabilities. There are a lot of things that we can do in this space, and there's a lot of solutions on the market. It is very common, or used to be very common. Nowadays, it's not so common anymore, and that's a very good thing that people are pushing to the repo, to the public repo, especially secrets from accessing the cloud infrastructure, like access to storage, access to database, and so on. There are different tools on the market that give you the ability, for example, like Git Secrets, to scan automatically your repo to identify if some keys were used, some secrets, and then even to block uh, uh, to block that push. I saw some interesting implementation that I really like. If, for example, in the time span of 1 week, a technical person is doing free push where he has secrets that he's trying to push, automatically his account is suspended. And then he needs to go to the IT request to his account to be unlocked and so on. So you can play a little bit with it. Secret scanning, for example, using Git Secret is a pretty nice tool. It's very useful. Another one, I know that was retired, but I really enjoy it. This is why I like to mention is CritScan. It for me it was pretty nice how you could integrate it, especially when you had to run a POC or a demo or things like that. Now, from the secrets point of view, if you take a look from the number of secrets for a single owner that you have, it's pretty crazy if you take a look on how many of them were published in which type. But in the end, a lot of people are publishing the keys, are using the keys, and we need all the time to manage them. This is why at the beginning I talk about role-based access control, because there are a lot of situations when you don't need these keys. If you if you, for example, are using only one cloud vendor like Azure, except cases when you use third parties, for example, when I say third parties can be another system that is not hosted by you. In most of the cases, you can rely on role-based access controls and service principles to do the authentication, to do the access control without using any kind of token, secret, even certifications. Yes, sometimes we need to use certifications, sometimes we need to use tokens. And in that kind of situations, we need not only to ensure that we have a solution like Keyword or any other vault solution, but also we need to ensure that we don't store the secrets in configuration in this location, even if they are encrypted, because we don't know exactly who get access to what and which machine is compromised. Because somebody could put a hand on the configuration file, we say, oh, it's not a problem, we have everything encrypted. And also, you might end up with a node, with a, let's say, with an Azure VM that is also compromised, or even a machine from somebody from the technical team that might have the keys that would allow that person to access that secrets. I would like also to talk more about what other tools we have when we talk about secret scanning. For example, we have GitLeaks, Spectral Ops, Scan, Git all secrets, detect secrets. I want to highlight some of them that I really find them pretty nice. Git secrets is very nice to use. I would say that for a short POC or when somebody is learning, Git secrets it's super cool. Spectral Ops is another tool that I really like from the UI point of view because it generates some nice UI interfaces that can be easily shown to somebody like a PM or delivery manager or somebody from the board to understand what is happening behind this behind the scene. GitLeaks, it's a pretty nice tool, for example, for a fast POC. So Git secrets with GitLeaks goes very well when you are in the moment in time when you want to have a POC, just to show to the customer, just to show to the stakeholder what is the value, what is the extra value that you can add. Now, a small comparison between some of them. If you want to have the full control and you don't need too much UI, I would say that GitLeaks can be a pretty nice way how you could use it. Git secrets, it's nice, but it's still it's an MVP stage. Spectral Ops is the one that I really enjoy. It's very complex, but it's not free, and you have an initial learning curve that you need to accept. Now, going forward, let's talk about network security. We already know about these three core components: VNets, network security group, and application gateway that is coming, of course, with WAF, with web application firewall. I think that with the first two, they're pretty easy. VNets, most of the people nowadays we are using. Network security group, I see a very good adoption level. On the application gateway side, there are some challenges, especially when we're talking with WAF. And why? Because in most of the cases it's about the costs. And many times people are forgetting to consider what are the direct benefits. Because when, for example, you are starting to use an application gateway with web application firewall, all the API protection layer that usually you are implementing at the API level in your application, you're putting on top of your application when you're exposing another third party, you don't need that anymore. And it means that it saves you time, support, and monitoring, because also monitoring is very important, because if you have an out-of-the-shelf solution, you don't need anymore to monitor, to do too many security tests on that part and so on. And the most important thing here is that if somebody is trying to attack you, not only brute force, but basically trying to gain access, because all that load will be blocked at application gateway, it means that your backend it is not hit by that payload. So you don't need to scale your backend system. Your backend system is not impacted and can serve without any kind of problem the real users. So the business goes as expected. Versus if you put that firewall layer for example, top 10 OAuth protection and so on at the application layer inside your system, even if you have a third party, a library, but because you have that part, the payload, the CPU level that is increased is in your backend. It is your application layer, meaning that your normal users will be impacted by that. Something that also I would like also to mention is that another layer that we need to consider is the versioning of your API. And also we have, for example, specific services that needs to take this that can take this payload, like the API management. And similar with application gateway, also API management, or let's say the challenge with this is that also it's come with additional cost. But what is providing to you is a layer where you can manage your API, manage your versioning, and control who has access to what. Meaning that if you go in a combination with API management and application gateway, you end up in a solution where in the backend you are focusing in only one thing, on the business, implementing the business flow, the business rules, and focusing how you can bring value to the customer. Versioning part is done inside the API management. Access control, identity access management part, who has access to what, and so on. You are fully implementing inside the API management. You have the application gateway that is fully managing the security layer. Uh, if you put on top of that a load balancer and traffic manager like front door, you have all that security, routing, access control outside your system. And when you implement a business flow, you already know when you write the code that that person has the rights to be able to access that API. You know exactly who is that person. You know what kind of role he has, and you can focus on serving that request, giving back some maybe some data or triggering specific things behind the scene. Secrets. I see key vault used everywhere. But sometimes, except the key vault, we also need to do some basic things. For example, if you're using, let's take a very basic example. If you're using Azure Storage, in Azure Storage, you have key rotation capabilities. But the question is, how many of you are using and are doing rotation secrets every few days, few weeks, few months? And all that services, and you need to be very careful when you build an application to take a look on the services that have also keys available. Even if you don't use them, you need to ensure that keys cannot be accessed and also are rotated every specific time interval, because sometimes you could have a breach and you don't even know about that. When somebody get access to through a compromised system to Azure portal and to Azure, they are stealing these access keys and they are staying low for 1 to 3 months until they would try to fetch the data or to modify the data and so on. And if you have the right policies, you could handle more or less this, because for example, one of the disadvantages of access keys, for example, in Azure Storage, is that the keys themselves also provide access to write, delete operation and so on. Of course, you can have backups, you can have other mechanisms that Azure Storage is providing, but in the end, you might be affected for a short period of time. Now, when you talk about compliances and governance, we already heard about Microsoft Defender. If you didn't have the opportunity to use it until now, I would say that it's one of the core services when you need to do compliance checking. Why? Because through Microsoft Defender, you can, or Microsoft can fully audit all your resources, identify how they are deployed, if you are aligned with different requirements. And if you have a compliance regulation that you need to check that is not part of Microsoft Defender, there is a channel and there's a dedicated team that can support you in defining that custom set of rules that needs to be checked. On top of my Microsoft Defender, you have Azure policies. And Azure policies from the governance point of view is the most important thing that you need to consider and you need to implement from the beginning. Because Azure policies not only refer to what users can do in the application, you might manage this in different way, but also specify exactly the technical team, what is able to do and what is not able to do. What kind of roles, for example, can access different environments, where different resources can be deployed, meaning that because of some compliance regulation, maybe you are forced to do the deployment and only in EU countries. Through Azure policies, you can specify exactly this. You might have some other standards that are internal inside the organization and or enforced by a regulation that you are not allowed yet maybe to use, let's say, Azure OpenAI, or from the computation point of view, you can use service A, B, C, and D, but not the other ones. And then through the Azure policies, you can enforce that only specific type of services and of course some specific tiers can be spin up. So you can define policies that specify where the solution can be deployed, what kind of services, and another important thing from the FinOps point of view, Azure Policies is providing us the capability to specify even the tier of services that somebody can spin depending on their role. Meaning that, for example, you have the development team that can spin up only small tiers of different resources. You can have the data scientist team that can spin up Azure ML, some Microsoft Fabric stuff, and so on, but only specific occasions because they are working with data and they cannot go outside, let's say, Germany or UK, and they cannot spin anything else that is around that site. And also the third thing that I would like to highlight is the importance of Azure blueprints. And now when we talk about blueprints, we need to consider that Azure blueprints are, in the end, the high-level best practice and recommendation that Microsoft is providing for a specific use case. Use case not means only a specific type of application, but also a use case that would align with standard compliance requirements that you might have for a specific industry. Excuse me. And just before closing, I would like to talk more about automated vulnerability scanning. Yes, Microsoft Defender is also can do this part, also can provide recommendation and automatically fix, and is doing a great job. Also, we have OAuth App that is doing a great job for penetration testing. And let's take a look on some other services. And what I would like now to go together with you is what is a service and what does this provide? Because there's a few of services, and we need to have a clear vision exactly what is doing by each of them. So we have Microsoft Defender for Cloud that we already talked. And more or less, it's about assessment, doing assessment of some security checks automatically, can do recommendation, and can also react. We have the Zap Attack Proxy that can identify vulnerability to penetration tests that are done automatically. So you can have, for example, tests that are done not only before each launch in pre-production environment, but also, for example, you could run Zap every night in the development environment or in some other environment, just to ensure that what was implemented, what was configured until then, it's okay. The third thing, you need web application firewall that we already talked. And one of the benefits, it's top 10 threads of OAuth that are automatically covered, and um, you are protected automatically by them. The fourth one is dependency scanning. For dependency scanning, um, and why this is important? Because nowadays, maybe I'm just saying, maybe for one component that you're building, you are using 100 or 500 libraries that are built, provided by somebody else. And when a vulnerability happens to that part, to that library, to that package, you need to know, you need to be able to react. So you need a mechanism that is doing dependency scanning. Azure DevOps, GitHub, Dependabot can do this very good. And you need to consider that this scan is not done only one time or every time when you want to go in production, because vulnerabilities can appear for existing libraries and packages that you are already using, meaning that once you go live, your job is not finished from dependency scanning. You still need to scan with the new information that appear all the time to ensure that what was released in production doesn't have any kind of dependencies that are vulnerable, have a day zero problem. We are talking about now about continuous security assessment, where more or less it is about continuous scanning tools like Qualys and so on. And the last one that I would like to highlight is as you, for example, do dependency scanning for packages, you also need to do dependency scanning for containers to scan the images of the container that you are using. How this can be done? One option is Microsoft Defender that is doing a pretty good job for AKS images. Also, you have the if you are using Azure Container Registry that can be used to scan and to identify any kind of risk that you have to the images before deployment them. So you have a full set of services that you need to be aware of. You need to know how to integrate them and to be able to roll out, because each of them are covering a specific part of your system. You will see that I just give you some example, but you will find also on the internet other tools that are covering the same thing, and they are amazing. I tried to stay as close as possible to Microsoft ecosystem, but there are a lot of tools on the market. Now, before closing, talking about business continuity and DR, sometimes we are forgetting about how important are the backups. How important are Azure backups? How important to have them configured in the right way? And when I'm saying in the right way, it's not only creating the backup. I would say that nowadays, if you do a backup of a database, it's not like 15 years ago when you had to check if everything goes well. Most of the time, things go as expected. By except doing the backup, you need to ensure that the backup is stored in a safe place. Because if somebody put the hands on the backup, even if it's encrypted, uh, even if you're using a very complex password, you don't know exactly how it can be compromised. I remember a long time ago, I think in at the last TechEd, before they were calling Ignite, I don't know, maybe it was in Chicago. I saw um, I saw Paula in a 90-minute session, and she broke a SQL backup. And she show exactly what are the tools that you need to use to go in the binaries of the backup and replace the predefined token for the password with a predefined one that you have, and then voila, you had access to it. And that's just one example. There are many other things that you can do. Also, there are some times when people are doing backups and they don't encrypt them. And if you take a look on Google, you will see that a lot of breaches happen just because not of the main data or storage, but because of the backup. Somebody put a hand on the backup and they were able to access it. The last thing is Azure Site Recovery. Now, for developers that are building an application, you might not be very close to it, but Azure Site Recovery is giving you the ability to be able to backup and restore your workloads in case of something happen. To be able to restore them in another availability zone, to be able to restore them in another Azure region, on your on-prem solution, in another cloud vendor, and so on. And this component is very important because this part gives you the ability to have an end-to-end automatically system that take the backup, take the payload, and kick it off in another location. And just before closing this topic, something that we should also keep in mind is that even if I said, and even if we know that, for example, a backup of SQL goes all the time as expected, you should have a written procedure. What are the recovery? What are the DR steps that needs to be done? And why? It's not about that the SQL backup will not be able to be restored, but except that restore, there are other activities that needs to be run before and after. Some of them can be fully automatically, but sometimes you have some manual steps. And when you put pressure on people, well, man, your bank solution is down. You need to recover as fast as possible. That people might do mistakes or might forget about what is the value of that flag that need to be configured to make the system to work as expected. So you need a full written procedure with all the steps that needs to be done, how you need to handle them, and so on. And this one um, should be checked. You should have a simulation every maybe 3 months, 6 months, and also consider the component that you assume that will never go down. Talking about Azure, for example, what you would do if, for example, the entry ID tenant that you are using goes down. Are you waiting to do a restoration? What if they are losing your data? Okay, in that case, what are all the configurations that were done previously and that would need to be documented or written in a PowerShell or something else that would give you the ability to rebuild that tenant, to rebuild all the roles, group, and so on. Because in many cases, best case what you can find is a conference page with some of them listed, but not with the full information. And if you need to restore them, there are big chances that you might forget some steps to do. Even if it take, let's say, 3 days, as long as you have the full procedure and steps, this might be fine because it might be the only solution that you have available. The complexity of the system that we need to manage is pretty high. Except the application layer, we need to ensure that we are integrating and we are using the right tools inside our applications that are running inside Azure, and we are doing the right integration using services that give us the security layer that the customer expect from us. There are many tools, there are many ways how you can solve different problems, but what we need to ensure that each component that needs to be handled from the security point of view has mitigation and the solution plan. Thank you for being with me today. I hope that you found the session useful. We have a few minutes now for Q&A, or we can meet in Zoom in a few minutes.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Radu. This has been really, really great. Security is a vast topic, but I think you managed to give us a very great overview in just 45, 50 minutes. So thank you so much for that. And now we're going to have a Q&A session, but before we go into that, I would just like to advertise here that after we finish our session, we would like to welcome every one of you for a short digital fika, which is a Zoom meeting where you will be able to talk directly to Radu and discuss things a little bit more here in detail. So let me also share that link here in the chat. One small moment here. So either you can scan the QR code or you can use this link here in the chat. So so then we can go through here the questions answered here during the stream. So one question here which was asked very early on in the stream was from Kate. So she was asking about some real-world example of security breaches and how they could have been prevented using Azure tools. So I think you've given a lot of examples here throughout the stream, Radu, but is there anything in particular you would like to add?
I would say that one of the tools that I highly recommend to use is Microsoft Defender, especially the premium tier, not the free one. Why? Because it's giving you the overview of the features and configurations that you might miss. On top of that, you have all the other parts, but that is one of the starting point. And there are a lot of breaches that you could avoid just having it. And just give a very simple example. If you don't have rotation of your keys, access keys, he will let you know. If you have by mistake somehow configured that also you accept HTTP request, not only secure access, he will let you know. And also he will, most of the cases, he will give you a script that can run automatically to fix that problem. It's very basic, it's very simple, but in the end, most of the breaches I would say that are happening because of these small things that you just forget to do or to cover.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a question here from Jonah. She asked, what are your recommended security tools for self-hosted Azure DevOps agents through Azure VMs or Azure VM scale sets?
What are the recommended security tools for self-hosted Azure DevOps agent through Azure IVMs? That's a very good question. I was just thinking from the tools so if you talk about the tools, for example, you can also have Defender that could run, but also by the tool themselves, I think, or what I would recommend. Just one time, I want to go back to the slides. Uh, I think that for example, and I'm just thinking, if we, for example, take secret management, something maybe like HashiCorp could be used for it, and the HashiCorp Vault for the configuration. So this is one thing. For example, you have, for example, you have different playbooks for hardening the security, or if you take, for example, Anchor as an example for custom runtime security, that would be able to run inside the agent and dig inside any kind of thread and to be able to react to it. For identity access management, if you, for example, let's assume that you don't use or you're trying to find out if your custom role-based access control and you what kind of configuration you've done, you could use something like teleport. I think that is used to be called this kind of service. What else we could have uh, for threats detection? If, for example, you want to have something different than Microsoft Defender, there was an open source monitoring solution. I think that was called Wazup. But one of the approach that I would recommend to do is to take each kind of layer that you would like to cover and look exactly what are the tools. What I mean by that, I'm not aware, for example, of a tool that is handling everything. This is why, for example, in the pipelines you have the ability, and in the end you're allowed to run different steps and different custom activities and system that would do scanning of different layers.
Right. Okay, we have another question here also. From Jonah. She asks, "What is the best way to secure and protect Azure front door instances or endpoints? Is PAF for front door the best option, or is there any other better security tools or practice?"
Something that Azure Front Door now has, it is the WAF part. So basically the web application firewall that also is part of Azure Front Door. The same way we had for application gateway, for app gateway, we have also for Azure Front Door. This would, for example, give you protection for uh, some pre-configured rules like top 10 OWASP, but more or less is the layer 7. What you don't have is DDoS protection. And then on top of front door, you'd need an DDoS protection system just to ensure that if somebody hits your endpoint, you be able to uh, protect for this. And the last thing that you could do here, and you need to ensure, is that all that APIs that you are protecting through front door to application gateway are not publicly available over the internet, meaning that they are protected inside a VNet. Maybe you use, for example, Azure private link just to provide access through different systems, through different VNets and subsystems, but otherwise from the public internet or for the users, they all the time go to the front door and to the application gateway. And some other protection, for example, can be like defining some custom rules in Azure Front Door. If you talk about that, if you know, for example, the users usually are only from Europe, and you can do some geo blocking part. But this comes with pro and cons because you don't know exactly. For example, just give you an example. I have an out-of-the-shelf VPN connection that is established. I notify that sometimes I'm based in Romania, I'm based in Cluj, but sometimes I go through Bucharest, but sometimes I'm going through Amsterdam out. So even with geo-blocking, there might be sometimes some false alarms.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a question here from Vladimir who says, how can I configure Azure API management to prevent DDoS attacks and secure against other common API gateway threats? Does API management have security tools turned on by default?
So by default, if you're talking about API management that Microsoft is providing, you don't have DDoS protection. You have some, you can define inside the API management some rate limits, meaning more or less the number of calls that are accepted in a specific time interval, in a specific time window, but nothing more than that. If you want to protect, you can have an approach like as I said in the previous question, like blacklisting or whitelisting the IPs that sometimes might be a solution. Depend if it's a B2B or B2C. If it's a B2B, IP whitelisting usually works pretty well. But if you really need the DDoS protection, then you would need to enable Azure DDoS protection service. That is cut. And why? Because API gateway, it's about layer 7, but it's not DDoS protection. Azure DDoS protection comes with layer 3 protection, level 4, and level 7. So you already have protection for DDoS attacks on layer 3 at the packaging. You have a layer 4 at the transport and layer 7. So I would say the best way is to go with Azure DDoS protection.
Okay. Okay. And then I think we have the last question here for today, which comes from Michael, who says, when creating virtual networks, how would you segment them into resource groups?
Okay. Creating a virtual network, how would you segment them into resource group? Now, depends. It's not very clear for me exactly at what Michael is referring to. If you would like to segment them, for example, through per environment or per subnet, per sub component. But more or less, you should have virtual networks for each environment. So you shouldn't share this virtual network for the same environment. There's sometimes depends on the size, and I would say about policies. If you should have subnets or different VNets for each applications, it's something that you might discuss. But the standard approach is to have a VNet per each application. Something that needs to be considered here, more important, is to take a look on HubSpot topology. And I think the HubSpot topology, and what is referring, the HubSpot topology is ensuring that you have only one hub where all the communication from the internet to your application goes through that hub, ensuring you that you can audit, you can control, you have some security virtual appliance in only one location. And also each spoke, you can imagine that is a different application. And the communication between two applications, between two spokes, all the time also go through this hub to be able to monitor, control, and so on. If you apply HubSpot topology that usually is used in large enterprise solution, then you end up with a conclusion, and this is how I would recommend that each application should have a different virtual network. I think that in around 95% of the cases, this would not affect the performance. There might be some narrow cases where you have very, very, very chatty systems, but there might be some exception where you want two applications or multiplayer application to stay in the same VNet. I'm just thinking about stock market applications. That might be that narrow case, but in general, VNet per application and all the time don't mix the environments under the same VNet.
Yeah, so I think maybe that goes into his follow-up question. He said that instead of creating a virtual network into a separate resource group, but instead having the VNet inside the dev, test, and prod resource groups.
As for VNet, I personally consider that you should have different resource group for each environment. But VNet and resource group, even if allow you, so resource group are more virtual grouping of resources that give you the virtual view of grouping. When you talk about VNet, is more close to physical because you are connecting some Azure services to VNet, and also the resource group themselves should be separately. And yes, you could have multiple resource group under the same VNet. This can be done. In this way you could say that under a VNet you can have different resource group for each environment. Initially might be easily to implement, but I would keep them as different VNets. So I wouldn't go on that approach. Sorry. Excuse me. To have to mix the same VNet under multiple risk group, especially because I'm thinking and consider how also you manage the access control, and if something goes uh, not as expected in access control management of the technical people, you can end up without knowing that somebody would have access to prod environment or some data from the prod environment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We also have some messages. Kate says thank you for answering her question. Vladimir, thank you so much for your answer. And also from Jonah here. And but before we close this stream, I would also like to share some resources that I think can be very valuable for everyone. So the first resource that I would like to share is an article here that you gave us here, Radu, which is this one. So this is an article that gives you a very good overview on what you should think about when you develop secure applications here on Azure. But we also have some other resources here. So one of the things that I would like to emphasize here is that there's a lot of training material for free on Microsoft Learn. So one of them is this resource. Just share this. So this is actually a training resource here for this security fundamentals exam, and there is an associated learning path which is for free. So the certification is not for free, but the training to train for it, that's for free. So I encourage everyone who is interested to look into that. And in the same way, we also have another resource here for, let me just copy. So this is the same setup here, but this is for the Azure Security Engineer certification. And we also have a third one here for the Cybersecurity Architecture Expert exam. Which is this one. But in addition to that, Microsoft has also something they called Applied Skills. So the Applied Skills, they are an exam which is for free, but they also have a training learning path which is also for free. So I'm going to share two links here. The first one is for using the Microsoft Sentinel, which is this one. And then the last one is how you can secure your services and workloads with Microsoft Defender. And that's this link here. Yeah. So security is a very important topic. So I hope you will find these links valuable here. So with that said, I would like to thank all of you, and please join our Fika now that we will start as soon as we finish this stream here. So you can just scan this QR code to join me and Radu here. So do you have any final comments, Radu, before we finish?
No, just one more time. Thank you for joining the session. Feel free to reach me on LinkedIn if you would like to have a chat or to change different ideas and aspects, because as we saw in the question, there are multiple ways how you can solve a problem. They're not wrong or wrong approaches. It's a lot about the context on what kind of skills you have available and time and budget. And I would like to learn more from you and from what are the other ways how you solve your day-to-day security problems from Azure.
Yep. Yeah, so thank you so much, and see you in our next session here. Have a good weekend.